Hey, what is up everybody? Welcome back to an episode of Pokemon Go, but also just kind of Pokemon in general today. Because we're going to be talking about Pokemon types, but simplified. Okay? So, a lot of times in raiding and just in Pokemon in general, people don't know what works against what. With Pokemon Go, a lot of people have just picked up the game and kind of been like, oh, let's catch some Pokemon. Let's catch some Pikachus. Or like they get in because of someone else, like a kid or spouse or partner or whatever, and they themselves don't know, what is what. So today we're going to kind of break down what everything is, but simplified, because technically we can get into some like crazy stuff here. So fire types, right, are strong against ice types, bug types, grass types, and steel types. Cool? Cool. They're chilling. Now, they're weak against water types, rock types, ground types. Okay? Cool. We're chilling. Now, here's where like the weird stuff gets into. First of all, in Pokemon Go, there are no immunities. Okay? There's 0 immunities. In the main series game, there are. So that's going to be like a part of like a part 2 of this does well, of like, let's go more in depth, because catch this. Fire types then resist or take half damage against other fire types, bug types, grass types, steel types, not ice, but fairy types. Excuse me, what? Where'd fairy come from? Right? We're not going to talk about all that today. They also are ineffective or deal half damage against fire types, water types, rock types, and I want to say, dragon types, right? Like where'd this come from? So today we're going to be talking simplified, right? So we're going to get all this away, put all this down, and we're going to go through all 18 types. That's right, there are 18 types of Pokemon. So we're going to get rid of this. No more of that. And no more of that. So, simplified. Let's start with fire. Okay? Going a little slower now. It's going to be strong against grass types, bug types, ice types, and steel types. Cool? Savvy? Nice. Now, fire types will be weak against water types, rock types, and ground types. So basically think of it as how like a fire will burn grass, bug, melt ice, and melt steel, but you use rocks or ground or earth to put out a fire, or water to put out a fire. So a lot of this is where kind of things stem from. So with that being said, let's talk about water types. Water types are going to be strong against fire, ground types, and rock types, but will be weak against grass and electric type Pokemon. Cool? Cool. So this is why, like, when we fought Kyogre a month ago, we used grass types and electric types. So now, stick with the core 3 of grass type, fire, and water types. Let's talk about grass types. So grass types are going to be strong against water types, strong against ground and rock, and that's going to be it for strengths, but will be weak against ice, fire, poison, flying, bug. So yeah, grass, kind of weak against a lot, which is why typically people will use electric type teams against water type Pokemon, just because they have less to think about in terms of weaknesses. But then remember, this is just the like simplified guide. All those ineffectiveness, resisting, and all that kind of stuff. Throw all that stuff in there. This is why electric types are nice. Speaking of electric type Pokemon are going to be strong against water types, flying types, but will only be weak against ground types. So that's why electric is super nice. It gives like a very cool little just chill. It's good against what it's good against and weak against what it's weak against. Now, technically, ground types will be immune to electric types. In Pokemon Go, what this means is that electric types will do twice resisting damage. So instead of half, they're half, so a quarter amount of damage instead of 0 damage at all. But, as also we're talking about ground types are going to be strong against electric types, rock types, fire types, steel types, and will be weak against water, ice, and weak against grass. So, again, this is kind of why Kyogre kind of just beats out Groudon in a lot of conversations, because ground is weak to water, but water destroys ground. So kind of cool little thing there. Let's go ahead and talk about the first gym in Pokemon, rock types. So rock types are going to be weak against grass and water, as well as steel and fighting types. So this is why a lot of times in early Pokemon, choosing either Squirtle or Bulbasaur makes sense, because you beat Brock right away. But Rock is going to be strong against fire types, ice types, flying types, and bug. Because squash bug with Rock. Which is why Charmander is kind of like the hard route to take in early Pokemon for Gen 1. Fun facts. So we've been talking a lot of crud about bug types, but let's go ahead and see what they're good against. Bug types are actually one of the few Pokemon that are going to be good against psychic types, as well as dark types and grass. But most grass types are also have something else that resists bug and gets into all that extra stuff that we're not going to talk about. But basically, this is just knowing what to put into a raid, right? So say you're facing a Mewtwo, right? Bug is strong against Psychic. So this is why we're talking about this. Let's just kind of break this down, go through it. We are kind of going through a crash course today. So Bug is also going to be weak to flying, fire, rock. Actually, that's about it. Yeah. So Bug isn't actually too bad. It's just that there's so many flying, fire, and rock types, especially really good ones. That's why Bug usually gets kind of a bad rap. But it's actually not too bad, and is one of the few things that's good against Psychic, which is going to be the next thing that we talk about. And Psychic is going to be weak to Dark, Ghost, and Bug, and is going to be strong against fighting types, poison types. That's really it. The thing is that so many things are so weak to poison, are either part poison or fighting types. So Psychic is just a really interesting Pokemon typing, because it's really when we get into the more in-depth stuff. But Psychic, especially pure Psychic, is only weak to 3 types. Bug types are generally looked down upon, so it's going to be Dark or Ghost. And most Ghost type Pokemon, especially early or popular Ghost type Pokemon, are part poison, which Psychic is strong against. So that's kind of why we don't talk about the weaknesses of Psychic, just because most of the time Psychic types are just so good. Speaking of which, let's talk about Dark types. Dark types are going to be immune to Psychic, which means in Pokemon Go that they're going to be taking that double resisting. But Dark is also going to be strong against Psychic types. Is that all Dark is strong against? And Dark is going to be weak against bug types, fighting types, and fairy types. So Dark is basically like the answer to Psychic Pokemon. It's also strong against Ghost type Pokemon. So a lot of times Ghost and Dark kind of get put into the same category because they both are going to be strong against the Psychic category. But Dark is just very nice because it does have that immunity to Psychic, or in Pokemon Go, a double resist. Now let's talk about Ghost types. Because Ghost types are actually really interesting because they take double weakness or double resist or immune to normal and fighting type Pokemon. So that's going to be like a really big thing for Ghost types, especially because it's such a good defensive typing to have with 2 immunities. So we got to know how to take down Ghost type Pokemon. So Dark types are going to be your best bet, and then Ghosts are going to be strong against the Psychic type. The other thing is that Ghost is going to be one of the few types that are going to be strong against itself, so that means it's also going to be weak against itself. So Ghost is just kind of like, if you have a Ghost, use a Ghost. But it's also going to be weak against the Ghost type, so just use Dark type Pokemon if you're going up against a Ghost type Pokemon. So that's going to be our spooky trio of Dark, Ghost, and Psychic types. But the reason why like a lot of Ghost type Pokemon don't like being in a battle against Psychic types is because of the Poison types. Because Poison is going to be weak to Psychic as well as Ground types. Poison is also going to be strong though against Grass types. And the Fairy typing. So that's why against like Pokemon like Tapu Bulu, Poison types are just doing absolutely crazy damage. Because they're going to be doing double damage because of the grass, and then another double damage because of the fairy, or also known as quad damage or quad weakness. So that's going to be the really cool thing with poison types, is that they take down fairy types and are really one of the 2 typings that take on fairies. Alrighty, so that is going to be the poison typing, and with everything else here that we've talked about, let's go ahead and talk about the fairy typing, the newest type to Pokemon. And the answer to dragons. So this is why we love the few fairy type Pokemon that we have, and we love the fact that fairy type Pokemon are finally getting more moves and more just better fairy types and like a little more love in Pokemon Go. Because there's so many dragons, dragon legendaries, dragons in raids, just dragons in general that we have to fight, that the fairy type is just the best answer, because fairy is also going to be immune to dragon types, which means not only are they doing double damage, they're taking the quad resistance in Pokemon Go, or in regular game, 0 damage against dragons, which is super cool. Now, fairies are going to be weak against, or take double damage from, poison types, as well as these steel types. So this is why we now have a new kind of core of fairy, dragon, and steel, or like core types basically are like a little triangle where the fairies beat the dragons beat the steels usually, and the steels usually beat the fairies. That core doesn't work quite as well as the fire, grass, water core, where fire beats grass, grass beats water, and then water wraps around and beats fire. But yeah, very cool. So let's go ahead and talk about the steel types first, because steel is just really cool. Love steel. So they are going to be strong against fairy types. They are also going to be strong against rock types. Steel is really a great defense typing because of all the resistances that it has that we're not going to talk about, but basically it takes half damage from a lot of types. It is strong against the newest typing, fairy, as well as rock, and then takes an immunity to poison, or double resistance in Pokemon Go. Let's just go ahead and add double resistance here. And then it's going to be weak against fire types, fighting types, and ground types. So Basically, if you can break steel, grind it down, or melt it, you're good. And let's go ahead and talk about the other big type that we alluded to before, the dragon type. And dragon type is going to be one of those weird ones where it is going to be strong against itself as well as weak against itself. So one of the main and only counters to dragons for the longest time was just another dragon. But it is also going to be weak against ice types and newly fairy types. So that's really cool, and why we kind of build up some of our ice teams, our Mewtwo with Ice Beam, to take down dragons. Now, they are going to be strong against dragon. And that's all. They are resistant to fire, water, grass, and electric, and really only take damage against themselves. So dragon is just a really strong defensive and sort of offensive typing, since it has so simple of like a guide. So there is one of the biggest types in Pokemon Go, dragons. Use other dragons or ice or fairy types. They're really not strong against anything except themselves, which is very interesting to actually see and say out loud. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and talk about one of our last couple types here, the fighting type. Now, fighting is going to be weak against psychic, fairy, and flying types, but is going to be the only Pokemon typing strong against normal types. And they do so fighting. Oh, they're also going to be strong. LOL. They're going to be the only type strong against normal types, but they are going to be strong against some of the more defensive Pokemon, being the Steel and Rock type Pokemon. So that's going to be very cool, and kind of why we like having some fighting types around, since normal, it's the only way to be a normal type. And then Steel and Rock are just so bulky most of the time that it's nice to have a nice fighting type around. And then the last typing that we have to talk about today, the most common typing in Pokemon, the normal type, which is strong against absolutely nothing. Nada. Zip. And is only weak against one thing, and that is the fighting type. Yeah, I know, right? Kind of anticlimactic. But that is every Pokemon typing in Pokemon Go. And obviously in Pokemon. And kind of the most simplistic way of saying what they are strong against and what they are weak against. Now, if I left out a typing by accident, let me know in the comment section below. Also, if you want to know about all those resistances and the half strengths and half weaknesses in Pokemon, go ahead and let me know that also in the comment section below, since that would be a much longer video going into all the extra stuff like I showed you with the fire typing in the very beginning. But if you did like this episode, go ahead and smash the thumbs up button. If you're enjoying the series, please subscribe. And as always, God bless, and see you for another episode of Pokemon Go.